Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at a really smart strategy for business owners. It's about using trusts to, well, transfer their businesses more efficiently. Avoiding those usual headaches, the revaluations, the delays. We're going to explore how these legal tools can really streamline succession planning.
Exactly. It's something many owners, they focus so hard on building the business right now,
Right.
but maybe haven't fully looked at the complexity of passing it on. This deep dive should reveal how trusts offer some big advantages. We're talking about potentially bypassing, long court processes, unexpected tax
Those
bills
nobody wants.
nobody wants, and ultimately making sure the business transitions smoothly and keeps succeeding.
Okay, let's unpack this a little. When we talk about a trust for a business transfer, what does that actually mean? What's the basic idea here?
Okay, so at its core, a trust is it's a legal arrangement. The business owner legally puts their assets, could be shares, property, the whole company, into the control of someone called a trustee. Now, this trustee has a legal duty, a fiduciary duty, to manage those assets for whoever the owner designates the beneficiaries. And they have to follow the rules set out in the trust agreement.
So it's kind of like setting up a separate legal box to hold the business for the future owners.
That's a good way to think about it. Yeah, a box with a watcher, the trustee.
So it's more involved than just like naming someone in a will. There's actual management happening.
Precisely. The trustee isn't just sitting there. They have a responsibility. They need to act in the best interests of the beneficiaries and, crucially, make the transfer happen based on your specific instructions in that trust document.
Oh, okay.
This gives you much more control, and it's often faster than, say, relying only on a will, which usually has to go through probate.
Right, probate. I've heard that could be a real bottleneck. So tell us more about how trusts speed things up and maybe offer more privacy.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting, I think. So traditional transfers often get tangled up in the probate court system, which is public, first of all, and can take a long time. A trust, however, allows for a much more direct transfer. It's private.
How direct?
Well, the trustee can basically hand over ownership or control to the beneficiaries directly without needing a judge's okay.
So we could be skipping months, maybe even years of legal stuff. That seems huge for keeping a business running.
Absolutely. The transfer can happen relatively quickly. Think about minimizing disruptions to operations, staff morale, your customers. And like I said, it's private. It doesn't become part of the public court record.
Keeps your succession plans confidential.
Exactly.
Okay, now, the big one for many people, taxes. How can trusts help with this whole revaluation issue and, potential tax hits?
Right. What's fascinating here is that a properly set up trust can potentially sidestep a mandatory business revaluation right when the transfer happens.
Okay, how does that work? Normally, a transfer triggers things.
Usually, yes.
Yeah.
A transfer might be seen as a deemed sale, which could trigger capital gains tax or inheritance tax based on how much the business's value has gone up.
But certain trust structures can let the transfer happen without that immediate tax event. There's a concept called basis carryover.
Basis carryover.
Yeah, it means the tax basis of the assets, basically what you paid for them, adjusted, stays the same for the beneficiary. So capital gains tax might be deferred until they eventually sell.
Okay, so the tax doesn't just vanish, but you can manage when it hits, potentially pushing it down the road.
That's a good way to put it. Manage and defer. And furthermore, there are specific types of trusts, like grantor trusts or IDGTs, intentionally defective grantor trusts.
Okay, those sound technical.
They are a bit, yes, but they're designed specifically to allow transfers where there might be no immediate capital gains tax. The way they're set up, the original owner, the grantor, might still pay income taxes on the trust's earnings for a time. But the assets themselves are actually removed from their taxable estate. That's a big deal for estate tax planning.
So it reduces the value of their estate for tax purposes? Potentially, yes. It's sometimes called an estate freeze. You lock in the business's value for estate tax purposes when you create the trust, and any future growth happens outside your estate, so it's not taxed there.
Wow, okay. That sounds like a really powerful tool for long-term tax strategy. So this speed, the potential tax management, how does that all help keep the business stable and running during an ownership change?
Well, if you connect the dots, being able to transfer quickly and without necessarily triggering a big revaluation and tax bill right away, That directly helps keep the business running smoothly.
Makes sense.
You avoid those potentially long legal fights, the uncertainty around huge tax payments. Leadership control it can pass over efficiently. This prevents that kind of wobble that can really shake confidence, with employees, suppliers, customers.
Yeah, uncertainty is often the killer. Can you maybe give us a concrete example how a trust might make a transition smoother compared to, say, just using a will?
Sure. Let's take that fictional Sunnyside bakery. Imagine the owner wants to pass it to their daughter Mia when they retire.
Okay.
Without a trust, the bakery probably goes through probate court. Could take ages, might disrupt things, and there'd likely be a tax assessment based on what the bakery's worth now.
Right, at its peak value, maybe?
Possibly. But if the bakery's ownership is already sitting inside a trust, the transfer to Mia when the owner retires can happen fast, privately. The ovens keep running, and they might avoid that immediate capital gains hit based on a new valuation.
That really brings it home. What about situations where the kids or whoever is next aren't quite ready? Maybe they're too young or still learning the ropes.
That's a really important point, the flexibility. A trust can be set up to basically act as a holding pattern.
Wow.
So let's say the owner's kids aren't ready to run the show yet. The trust document can say, okay, this trusted manager or maybe an advisor acts as trustee and oversees things until the kids reach, say, age 30, or maybe they demonstrate certain skills.
So the trust acts like a bridge.
Exactly, a bridge. It prevents a forced sale or a rushed handover before the next generation is really prepared. And crucially, it avoids needing a new valuation right then, which might happen if you had to sell it temporarily or restructure outside a trust.
So it maintains stability until the right moment.
Precisely. Think about another example, the Lee family's grocery store. Dad gets sick unexpectedly. But the store's already in a trust, clear instructions. Control passes quickly, smoothly to the daughter. The store stays open. Community relies on it.
A good outcome.
Yeah. Now, flip that. Maybe the Smith family's bakery wasn't in a trust. Owner passes suddenly. Everything grinds to a halt for probate. Delays, complications. Maybe the business really suffers, loses value, or worst case, doesn't even survive the process.
Wow. Those examples really highlight a difference. Okay, so we've covered speed, taxes, continuity. What about other risks during a transfer? Things like creditors or lawsuits. Can a trust help there?
It's worth mentioning, yes. While it's not usually the main reason for setting one up for succession, a trust can, in some situations, offer a degree of asset protection.
How so?
The fact that the business assets are legally owned by the trust, this separate entity, can create a sort of barrier against the owner's personal creditors or maybe lawsuits during the transfer period.
So another potential layer of security.
Potentially, yes. But the level of protection really varies. Depends on the type of trust, state laws. You absolutely need specific legal advice on that aspect. It's not a guarantee.
Understood. Now, you said earlier the owner still keeps some control. How does that work if the business is technically in the trust?
That's the beauty of planning it right. The owner, when they create the trust, they're called the grantor, they set all the rules in the trust document.
They write the rule book.
Exactly. They decide who the trustee is, how the business should be run while it's in the trust, and exactly when and how it gets distributed to the beneficiaries. So they maintain significant control over the process and the outcome, even though the assets are legally held by the trust. It ensures the transfer happens the way they envisioned.
Okay, this all sounds pretty compelling. If someone listening is thinking, maybe a trust is right for my business, what are some practical, actionable steps they should think about taking?
Right. Good question. The very first step, honestly, is just thinking about it. Who are the potential successors? Who do you actually see taking over down the line? Make a list, even if it's tentative.
Start there.
Yes. Then, and this is absolutely crucial, you need to talk to the pros. An experienced estate planning lawyer, maybe an accountant who really knows trust administration. They can look at your specific business, your family situation, your goals, and advise if a trust really fits.
That consultation sounds key. What else should be on their checklist early on?
Definitely look at your current business documents, your operating agreement, shareholder agreements.
Right.
Make sure there's nothing in there that would actually stop you from putting shares or property into a trust. Sometimes there are restrictions.
Good point.
And start jotting down your wishes. How do you want the transfer to happen? Who gets what, when, under what conditions? The more detail you think through, the easier it is for the lawyer to draft something effective.
Are there any, really simple first steps someone could take, maybe even today, before they even book that lawyer meeting?
Yes, absolutely. Think about this. If something happened to you unexpectedly, tomorrow, who could step in and run the business, even just temporarily? Identifying that trusted person is a great practical exercise.
A sort of emergency contact for the business?
Kind of, yeah. And also just take a look at how your business is currently structured. Is it an LLC, S Corp, whatever? Is that structure easily adaptable for putting into a trust? Just get familiar with your own setup.
And when they do sit down with that lawyer or advisor, what specific things should they be asking about, especially regarding different types of trusts?
For sure. They should ask the advisor to explain the different kinds of trusts, grantor trusts, these IDGTs we mentioned, maybe others like asset protection trusts, and what the pros and cons of each are for their situation. Taxes, control, protection. They all vary.
So understand the options.
Definitely. And it helps if you go into that meeting with at least a rough outline of what you want to achieve with the transition.
Makes sense to be prepared. What about bringing family or partners into the loop early on?
Oh, that's an excellent point. Talking openly with family members, business partners, it's really important. Discussing contingency plans, what happens if. Being transparent helps manage expectations, prevent conflicts later on.
Get everyone on the same page, ideally.
Ideally, yes.
Okay, and thinking about protecting the business itself during this planning phase, any quick actions there?
Yeah, make a list, a detailed list of your key business assets. What exactly are you trying to protect and pass on? Inventorying is fundamental.
Know what you've got.
Exactly. And when you talk to your tax advisor, be direct. Ask them, how can a trust potentially save taxes and make this transfer smoother for my business? And finally, stress this. Trust documents aren't set it and forget it. Laws change, your circumstances change, your business changes. You need to review those documents periodically with your lawyer, make sure they still do what you intend them to do.
Regular checkups.
Yes, and maybe ask your accountant point blank, could a trust help us avoid a huge tax bomb when ownership changes hands? Use that kind of direct language.
This has been incredibly helpful, really insightful. So just to kind of wrap it all up, what are those core benefits again? Why should a business owner really consider a trust for their transfer?
Okay, summing it up, trusts offer a powerful way to get speed and privacy in the transfer. They can potentially soften the blow of revaluation and the taxes that come with it. And maybe most importantly, they help ensure the business keeps running smoothly, maintaining stability through the transition.
So it's really not just about that moment of transfer. It's much bigger picture planning for the future, protecting the value, the legacy.
Precisely. It's proactive planning. It's protecting family interests with a clear, efficient process. And yeah, it's about preserving the value of all that hard work that went into building the business in the first place.
Then I guess the big takeaway is don't wait until you need it. Planning ahead is critical.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Right.
Setting up a trust proactively before it's an emergency gives you control, gives you peace of mind, and lays out that clear path forward for your business's future.
Really wise advice. Thank you so much for walking us through the strategic use of business trust today.
Yeah.
It's definitely given us, and hopefully you listening, a lot to think about in terms of taking control of our business's futures and making sure that path forward is secure.